There is a doorless temple hidden in the interior wilderness of the psyche, where those born sensitive do not walk, but are summoned, not with trumpets or grand omens, but with the ache that will not leave, with the quiet knowing that one is carrying what cannot be named. This is not the path of the healer as savior, but the soul path of the seer, of the one who becomes an altar for what others abandon. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. The more you engage and stay with the content, the more YouTube shares these timeless insights with others. By doing so, you're not only helping this channel grow, but also spreading Carl Jung's transformative wisdom to those seeking meaning and inner truth. Let's dive into the depth of the psyche together. The empath, you see, is not here to cleanse the wounds of the world with their own lifeblood. That is the myth told by a culture that confuses absorption with care. The true empath is the oracle who feels in symbols, whose tears are not mere reactions but ancestral offerings. They carry an inner chalice, not filled by choice but by inheritance. And its contents are bitter and luminous all at once. Their suffering is the smoke that rises from generations of unlit fires. Their dreams are crowded with archetypes, not just of their own lineage, but of the tribe, the nation, the planet. They are not just individuals. They are the membranes between forgotten voices and a world too loud to hear them, and so they ache not because they are fragile, but because they are attuned. The empath is the violin strung too tightly in a room full of storms. To be this way is to become a living mythology. The empath becomes the vessel through which the unconscious howls its secrets, not because they chose this task, but because they were built to listen in a way others cannot. And if they do not know what they are, they begin to collapse under the weight of pain that is not theirs. They begin to believe in a false identity, the broken, the too much, the one who must always apologize for their depth. But there comes a moment, a sacred cracking, when the empath sees that their wound is not personal, it is prophetic. They are not simply a person with high sensitivity. They are the mythic mirror-bearer, holding before society its own blind spots. Their body becomes the battlefield of denied truths. Their sorrow is the language of archetypes trying to speak. And they are not alone. For deep in the night, when sleep eludes them, they are often visited by the spectral remnants of others' energies that do not belong, but have found a home. These are not illusions. They are the psychic imprints of trauma, of longing, of unacknowledged power. The empath walks among us not as a quiet friend, but as a threshold, as a veil through which the hidden becomes visible. They do not belong to daylight. They are kin to the moon and the well, to Hecate at the crossroads, to Inanna in descent. They are called to the underworld, not to be devoured, but to learn the language of the dark. This is no metaphor, it is initiation. It is the breaking open that reveals not only suffering, but the sacred architecture beneath it. And what they carry is not emotion, it is energy encoded with myth, with story, with exile. The empath feels the dreams of a child who never spoke their truth. They feel the rage of women burned at stakes they never lit. They tremble with the silence of fathers who were never allowed to cry. All of this lives in the body, and the empath's body becomes a shrine of remembrance. But here is the secret: they are not here to be devoured by the pain. They are here to digest it, to transmute it, to become alchemists, turning sorrow into song, turning exile into embodiment. And that is the task of a lifetime. For to be empathic is not to rescue, it is to witness. And witnessing is the lost art of healing. The soul does not need to be fixed. It longs to be seen. And the empath, when awakened, becomes the seer, not the fixer, not the savior, but the sacred observer whose gaze itself becomes balm. Yet, before they awaken, they often wander, mistaking boundaries for betrayal, mistaking compassion for collapse. They become enmeshed, tangled in others' emotions like vines around their own breath. And the world encourages this, rewards it, even telling them that martyrdom is love, that burning for others is noble, but awakening is rebellion. It is the moment when the empath draws a circle around their spirit and says, "I am not a container for your disowned grief." It is when they learn the sacred distinction that to feel is not to fuse, that to know pain is not to carry it. This discernment is not coldness. It is the beginning of sacred fire. It is when the empath becomes the priestess, the shaman, the dreamwalker. They begin to speak not from depletion, but from depth, not to fix, but to invoke. And the world begins to tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. For the empath in their power is a storm dressed in silence. They do not raise their voice, they raise the vibration. And the collective shadow, once hidden, begins to surface. Racism, violence, betrayal, all the ancient poisons come into view. But so too does the hidden gold erotic vitality, mystical knowing, wild joy. All that has been buried under shame begins to stir, and that is the true gift. Not to feel for others, but to awaken them, to become a psychic bell that rings through the dream of forgetfulness, to walk into rooms and change the temperature not through effort, but through essence. This is no ordinary life. This is soul labor. And as the empath grows into this knowing, they begin to find others quiet initiates scattered like constellations. They begin to speak a language beyond words. A look, a tremble, a shared dream becomes the communion. They know who they are now, not victims, but visionaries. So, if you have felt too much, wept without cause, walked away from crowds feeling hollow, there is nothing wrong with you. You are remembering what the world forgot. You are the bridge between realms. The question was never, why am I like this? The question is, what truth am I called to midwife into the world? You were never meant to be the sponge. You were born to be the mirror. And the mirror does not absorb, it reflects. It shows what is there, in purity, in clarity, in truth. Let this be your return. And now, dear traveler of depth, I ask of you not a comment for vanity, but a ritual of meaning. Enter the symbolic circle by choosing a number that speaks to the theme that stirred you most. If you felt the call of transformation, the shedding of false skins, type 5 in the sacred number of change and elemental power. If the void resonated, the fertile darkness before becoming, choose the primordial womb of creation. If you were touched by the archetypes, the ancient blueprints of soul, leave Wu 7, the mystic's number, the seeker's path. If ego death whispered through these words, offering liberation through loss, type Tawut 13. The number of rebirth, the serpent cycle. If individuation called to you the long road home to the self, comment 1. The axis mundi, the unified flame. And if it was the sacred feminine or masculine that stirred your remembrance, choose 2. The sacred pair, the dance of polarity and union. These numbers are not digits, they are keys. Leave yours below, and let us see who else walks this mythic path with you. Welcome to the remembering. But once awakened, they witness without merging. They stand at the edge of the abyss and say, I see you. I do not abandon you, but I am not you. This is the birth of sovereignty in the empath. It is the moment they cease being sponges and become oracles. The symbol of the oracle is crucial here. For in myth, the oracle is not simply a teller of futures. The oracle speaks what is hidden, forbidden, unutterable. The oracle is always on the fringe between worlds, between paradigms, and often the oracle is punished for their sight. This, too, is part of the empath's journey to be misunderstood, ridiculed, even crucified, for revealing what others cannot yet bear to see. But do not mistake the pain of this path for misalignment. It is initiation. The world resists those who awaken it, because awakening requires death. Death of illusions, death of innocence, death of the false self. And so the empath must die many deaths of identity, of naive hope, of idealized love. But in each death, something ancient is reborn, not new but remembered. For the empath, at their core, carries ancestral memory. They are soul archivists, remembering what others have forgotten, and their pain is the labor of remembrance. When I encountered patients who fit this archetype, those who felt too much, those whose symptoms could not be explained by trauma alone, I knew I was meeting someone with a sacred burden, not merely neurotic, not merely wounded, but chosen by the psyche to carry the unlived stories of the world. And though they often presented with anxiety, depression, even dissociative states beneath these symptoms, was a light so bright it terrified them. Because the empath is not afraid of others, they are afraid of their own power. Power that, when misunderstood, becomes codependency, but when integrated, become presence, true presence. The kind that transforms a room, that unearths what has been buried, that stirs ancient longings in those around them, is the signature of the awakened empath. They no longer need to fix. They do not rush to rescue. They simply see, and in their seeing, others remember what they are. This is the medicine of the empath, not healing by action, but healing by being. And this is why they were never meant to be helpers in the traditional sense. The gift is not service, it is revelation. They are here to disturb the sleep of the world. To awaken the collective shadow is to disturb the ego's illusion of goodness, purity, and control. And no one thanks you for that, but the soul does. The soul thanks you when you speak the truth that no one dares speak. When you cry the tears that belong to a nation, when you feel the ache of centuries and do not numb it, but name it. This is not self-indulgence. This is sacred work. The ego will say, you are too much. The culture will say, you are too weak. But the psyche says, you are the key. The key to what? To integration, to the reunification of what has been split. For the empath carries the gold of the rejected parts. They are the bridge between the known and the unknown, the civilized and the primal, the conscious and the unconscious. And this is why the empath often feels between worlds. Because they live in liminality, in thresholds and dreamscapes. They hear what is unsaid, they feel what is not shown, they remember what has not yet occurred. Do not pathologize this. Do not reduce it to disorder. This is mysticism. This is initiation. This is archetypal embodiment. To dwell at the threshold between worlds is not comfortable. The empath's nervous system was not built for comfort. It was built for permeability. This is not a defect of biology, but a necessity of archetypal design. It is the vessel that must be porous enough for the collective to seep in, and yet sturdy enough not to shatter from the psychic weight it carries. Most empaths crumble, not because they are weak, but because they have not yet remembered that what they are experiencing is not theirs alone. It is the ache of the world moving through them, seeking form. Do you remember your dreams? I ask, not as a diagnostician, but as a mystic. For the dreams of empaths are not merely private. They are mythic. Their night visions often carry symbols too vast for the personal unconscious to generate alone. The dream of a burning city, the vision of a mother weeping blood, the recurring image of children locked behind invisible doors. These are not the echoes of isolated trauma. These are messages from the collective unconscious pleading for attention. It is not rare for the empaths to dream the dream of a nation, to carry in sleep what a people cannot hold in waking life. This is the burden of the oracle. And when this capacity is unacknowledged, the empath lives in a state of chronic overwhelm, not because the world is too much, but because they are interpreting the world through a personal lens. When what is needed is symbolic awareness. Symbolism is the native tongue of the unconscious. It does not speak in facts. It speaks in images, synchronicities, distortions, paradoxes. And the empath, before their awakening, often misinterprets these messages as madness. But madness is simply mystery, misunderstood. When the empath begins to see symbolically, to understand their emotions, visions, and sensations as archetypal data, they cease being victims of experience and become students of the soul. Let me offer an example. A patient once came to me, tormented by unexplainable guilt. No event in her life could justify the burden she bore. Her childhood was relatively unmarked by trauma. Her relationships were intact. Yet she woke each morning with the weight of sorrow pressing against her chest. In her dreams, she was often fleeing from ancient cities, in ruins, clutching children she did not recognize. In waking life, she avoided confrontation, feared, expressing anger, and often wept without provocation. This was not pathology. This was prophecy. Through the work of active imagination, we began to engage with the dream's symbols, not as metaphor, but as living realities. She came to recognize that the children she clutched in sleep were not hers, but the ungrieved dead of her ancestral line. Her family, it turned out, had survived multiple wars, genocides, migrations. She was the first to be born in peace. And peace, ironically, had made the pain more vivid. Her soul had been elected to carry what had never been mourned. This is the empath's task, to grieve what others cannot, to feel the pain that logic cannot justify, to become the priest of collective catharsis. But again, this does not mean martyrdom. It means transformation. For when the empath learns to work with the shadow symbolically, not personally, they access a deeper intelligence. They no longer feel compelled to save others, nor to take on more than they can hold. Instead, they stand as sacred witnesses, participants in the alchemy of remembrance. They do not heal by absorption. They heal by integration. And what is integration, if not the art of wholeness? Wholeness does not mean perfection. It does not mean happiness. It means the capacity to hold the opposites, to honor light and shadow, joy and grief, rage and tenderness, without collapsing into either. The empath, when whole, becomes the bridge between dualities. They become the transcendent function. I so often wrote of the third thing, born from the tension of opposites. They are not either, or they are both. And this integration requires solitude. The empaths must leave the noise of the crowd to hear the whisper of the soul. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the container in which the deeper self can emerge. In myth, the initiates always go into the forest, the desert, the cave. These are not places of punishment, but places of vision. The empaths must learn to befriend the hermit within, to retreat not as escape, but as preparation. For when the empath returns from solitude, they do not come back empty-handed. They return with vision, with truth, with gnosis. And their presence alone becomes catalytic, not because they preach, but because they embody. They become the living antidote to unconsciousness, not by striving, but by being. This is why, in ancient cultures, the empathic ones were often the shamans, the oracles, the visionaries. They were not seen as ill. They were seen as intermediaries between the visible and invisible. Today, we medicate what ancient tribes initiated. We silence what older cultures sanctified. The empath's suffering is not proof of their dysfunction. It is evidence of a culture that has forgotten how to honor the sacred, and the sacred always returns through the body. The empath's body is a map, a divining rod, a sacred text. But most empaths live at war with their bodies. They treat their somatic responses as betrayal, as if trembling, weeping, and exhaustion are signs of weakness. But the body is a shadow's canvas. It records what the mind represses. The empath must learn to listen to the body as oracle. When your stomach clenches in the presence of another, that is information. When your chest aches without cause, that is a summons. When your skin crawls, your eyes tear, your hands tremble, these are not symptoms, these are signals. The empath's task is to decode them, to ask what truth is trying to speak through me. Do you understand the gravity of this? The empath awakened becomes a prophet, not of doctrine, but of embodiment. They do not merely understand shadow. They feel it. They do not theorize about trauma. They carry it, and in carrying it, they become its translator. They give language to the unspeakable. They give tears to the uncried. They give voice to what has been buried beneath generations of denial. This is why their gift is so threatening, because to speak the truth of the shadow is to disrupt the illusion of the collective. And every collective, no matter how enlightened it appears, rests upon a pact of unconsciousness, a pact to avoid certain truths in order to maintain cohesion. The empath in their very presence threatens that pact. They say without words, I feel what you do, I see what you cannot, and I will not look away. This is not a comfortable energy. It is not a socially acceptable role, and so the empath is often exiled, not just literally, but psychically. They are scapegoated, pathologized, labeled too much. But remember this in ancient times. The scapegoat was not rejected for their sins, but for the sins of the community. The scapegoat was chosen to bear what others could not. This too is part of the empath's mythology. But mythology is not destiny. The empath must learn to put down the scapegoat's burden. They are not here to carry the sins of the world. They are here to name them, to feel them. Yes, but only long enough to translate them into awareness, and then release. Release is the empath's final initiation. It is the moment when they realize, this is not mine. It never was. But I am the one who can see it, feel it, name it, and let it go. That moment is liberation. That moment is sovereignty. That moment is the reclamation of the empath's true purpose, not to heal, not to serve, but to awaken. Awaken to what? To the fact that the collective shadow is not evil. It is unlived life. It is all that we have not yet dared to integrate. The empath's gift is to lead the way, not through force, not through argument, but through embodiment, through standing in the fullness of their sensitivity without shame, through modeling what it means to feel deeply and live freely, through daring to say, yes, I feel, yes, I tremble, yes, I carry what is not mine, but only for a time, and then I return it, transformed to the world. This is the alchemical act to take in the lead of unconsciousness and return the gold of awareness. The empath, when awakened, becomes the alchemist of shadow. They are no longer drowning in emotion. They are swimming in mystery. They are no longer lost. They are initiated. To be initiated is not to graduate into comfort. It is to cross a threshold from which there is no return. The empath who has awakened to their true function no longer fits into the world as it was. They are not interested in performing roles, in placating social norms, or in participating in unconscious dynamics. They are now participants in the deeper mystery, emissaries of the soul's evolution. And yet, this awakening does not come all at once. It arrives in waves, some gentle, others cataclysmic. First comes the disillusionment. The empath begins to see that their desire to help others was often a defense against their own inner chaos. They realize that empathy without boundaries is self-erasure. Then comes the collapse, the moment of psychic exhaustion when they can no longer carry the world and must learn to carry themselves. And finally, if they endure, comes the remembering. I was never here to fix. I was here to feel, feeling in its deepest form, its sacred perception. It is not the opposite of thinking. It is the complement. It is the right hand of intuition. When purified through shadow work, the empath's feeling function becomes a kind of inner compass guiding them toward what is true, even when truth is unwelcome. But truth, when wielded without grace, becomes a weapon. This is the next stage of the empath's maturation, learning to wield their sight with compassion. The unawakened empath seeks validation. The awakening empath seeks catharsis. But the mature empath seeks connection, not fusion, but true contact between sovereign souls. This requires humility. The empath must realize that feeling is not enough. They must develop discernment. Not all pain is theirs to hold. Not all suffering is theirs to mirror. The world is full of unresolved energy. The empath must learn which energies are theirs to witness and which are merely echoes, calling them into old patterns. The danger is romanticization. Many empaths mistake emotional chaos for spiritual depth. But chaos without clarity is not mysticism. It is confusion. The empath's goal is not to dissolve in feeling, but to refine it, to become not a sponge, but a chalice. The chalice. Yes, that ancient symbol, the vessel, the container of mystery and the Grail legends. The chalice is that which receives the blood of the wounded king. It is not a symbol of bleeding. It is a symbol of sanctification. The empath must become the chalice, not the wound. They must learn to hold suffering without becoming it, to honor the pain without identifying visit. This is no small feat. It requires a descent into the underworld of the self. The empaths must face their own shadow, not just the collective's. They must confront the parts of themselves that secretly enjoy being needed, that derive identity from rescuing others, for that fear their own emptiness and use service as a distraction. Only when they have done this can they begin to love without condition. Only then can they say, I see your pain. I honor it, but I do not need to fix it to feel whole. This is true compassion, not codependency in disguise, but presence without agenda. And when the empath lives from this place, something extraordinary happens. They begin to emit a field, not a shield, not a wall, but a field of coherence. Others feel it. They may not understand it, but they feel it. They soften in the presence of the awakened empath, not because they are being saved, but because they are being seen. To see without judgment is the rarest form of love. It is the love the empath is capable of, but only once they have seen themselves in their entirety. Once they have embraced their own shadow, their own rage, their own hunger, their own divinity. Then and only then can they see the world with true eyes. This seeing is not passive. It is not neutral. It is catalytic. The empath becomes an agent of psychic evolution, not by preaching, not by performing, but by embodying. Their very being becomes a mirror, a magnet, a map, a mirror, because they reflect what others cannot yet name. A magnet, because they draw forth what is hidden. A map, because they model the path from unconscious fusion to sovereign presence. This is why I say again, the empath is not born to heal. Healing is a side effect of their true work. Their true work is awakening. They are here to awaken the collective shadow, not to punish it, not to eliminate it, but to reveal its gold. For within the shadow lies the future, within the darkness lies the dream, and the empath is the dream's custodian. The dream not as fantasy, but a soul compass. The dreams of the empath are not idle wanderings. They are transmissions. And when the empath begins to record them, study them, engage with them through active imagination and symbolic inquiry, they unlock the keys to their own mythos. Each empath carries a myth, an inner story that transcends biography. When they live unconsciously, they are haunted by this myth. But when they awaken, they become the author, and their life becomes a living text, a scripture not written in words, but in presence. Presence that disturbs, presence that liberates, presence that says, I am here, fully, and in my being. I invite you to awaken. This is not comfortable work, but it is sacred. And sacred things do not ask for approval. They ask for integrity. The empath must stop asking, am I too much? And begin asking, am I aligned? They must stop trying to be understood and start living as a symbol. Symbols do not explain themselves. They evoke. They initiate. The empath awakened becomes a living symbol of wholeness, not perfection, but the capacity to integrate opposites. They are not light workers. They are twilight dwellers, those who carry the dusk and the dawn in their bones. And this twilight, this in-between, is the very place where transformation happens. The twilight is not a failure of the light. It is preparation. The empath walks this borderland not because they are lost, but because they are called to be the bridge between what was and what is becoming, between the crumbling of old identities and the birth of a more integrated humanity. They are midwives to the future. Not the technological future, not the mechanized future, but the psychic future. The one in which human beings remember that the soul is not a metaphor, that the unconscious is not a disorder, that mystery is not an obstacle to be solved, but a presence to be revered. You, all the empaths, have always known this. Even when you were ashamed of your softness, you knew it. Even when your tears embarrassed others, you knew it. Even when your dreams made no sense to the waking world, you knew it. The knowing was buried, perhaps, but it never died. It waited, patient. As the moon wise as the serpent for the moment, you would remember, this moment is now. We are living in an age of shadow eruption. The unconscious, longed in need, is breaking through the floorboards of civilization, in politics, in families, in the body. And while many run in fear, empaths feel the quake as confirmation, not of doom, but of birth, of labor, of emergence. It is painful. Labor always is. But what is emerging is nothing less than a shift in psychic structure. We are moving slowly from a culture of repression to a culture of reflection. And in this movement, the empath is both guide and ground. They are not the leaders in the traditional sense. They do not command. They transmit. They embody the new frequency. They teach without words, simply by refusing to numb. To feel in an unfeeling world is an act of rebellion, but it is also an act of creation. Creation of new myths, new archetypes, new ways of belonging. The empath, when they embrace their role as shadow awakener, becomes a myth maker. They no longer live according to the myths handed down by a wounded world. They begin to write their own through relationships, through art, through breath. They create symbols for what the culture has not yet named. They speak in the tongues of metaphor and feeling and dream. Do you understand the power of this? You are not here to fit into the existing paradigm. You are here to expose its limitations, to whisper of a deeper order, a more ancient wisdom, one that lives in the gut and the heart and the bones. This wisdom is not taught. It is remembered. It is remembered when the empath stops asking for permission, when they stop apologizing for their perception, when they stop shrinking themselves to avoid discomfort. You will make others uncomfortable. That is part of your design. Your energy illuminates what others have worked hard to forget. But you are not here to make people comfortable. You are here to make them conscious, conscious of the grief they swallowed as children, conscious of the dreams they abandoned, conscious of the rage they turned inward, conscious of the shadow they project onto enemies and strangers and lovers. You are the mirror, and to stand as a mirror is to risk being shattered. But hear me now. Every shattering is a beginning. Every fracture is a portal. The empath, broken open, becomes a vessel for the archetypal. Through their wounds, the divine enters through their tears. Truth flows through their silence. Wisdom speaks. This is not romanticism. This is reality. When seen through the eyes of the soul, the world is not waiting for perfect healers. It is waiting for whole humans. Humans who feel deeply, love wildly, weep loudly, and stand unwavering in the face of illusion. The empath is the forerunner of such humanity. But first, they must unlearn. Unlearn the savior complex. Unlearn the lie that their worth is measured by how much they suffer for others. Unlearn the addiction to approval. Unlearn the belief that they are only valuable when they are useful. You are valuable because you are, not because you fix, not because you serve, because you see, because you feel, because you remember. This remembering is your gift, and it will cost you. Make no mistake, your path will be lonely at times, misunderstood, dismissed, even feared. But the soul does not seek comfort. It seeks coherence. Coherence with truth. Coherence with the archetypal rhythms. Coherence with the pulse of the cosmos. When you live from this coherence, something ancient comes alive in you. The empath, once passive and reactive, becomes radiant and directive, not by force, but by presence, not by trying, but by being the chalice, the mirror, the threshold, the symbol. And so, I say again, for those who need it, tattooed on the psyche, you were never born to heal the world. You were born to awaken it. To awaken it not through ideology, but through intimacy. Not through performance, but through presence. Not through avoiding pain, but through embracing it as the gateway to wholeness. You are not too much. You are precisely what this dying world needs. It needs your trembling, your knowing, your sacred sensitivity, but not as a weapon against yourself, as a beacon that says, I will no longer carry what is not mine. I will no longer bleed for what will not change. I will no longer fuse with suffering to prove I care. Instead, I will feel with clarity, witness with strength, and speak with love that pierces illusion. This is the empath's revolution, not loud, but seismic, not visible, but transformative, not rewarded, but remembered by those who are ready to wake. And so I ask you now, not from my mind to yours, but from soul to soul. Are you ready to stop healing what does not want to be healed and begin awakening what is finally ready to remember? Are you ready to lay down the martyr's robe and rise as the oracle you have always been? Then breathe, feel, witness, and begin.